Michael Lancellotti is an artist from Wayne, New Jersey. He combines various forms of media to create his vision. He's created oil paintings, sculptures, and moss portraits. His work is showcased in galleries including the National Arts Club, and he won numerous awards for many of his pieces. He never sticks to one aesthetic and constantly creates different themes for his creations. His existence is art. He lives to create. His passion lies between the art and the message he is trying to send. His art questions the hypocrisy in our day-to-day life and makes people think outside the box. A free identity is what allows him to have no barriers when it comes to creating. And in his own words, craft is nothing but a Trojan horse. Let's take a deeper dive into Lancellotti's art.
Hello and welcome to Garden State of the Arts. I'm your host, Cece Bernstein, and today with us we have Michael Lancellotti. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm very good, thank you, Cece, and thank you for having me this afternoon.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, thank you.
So you've been creating art for quite a while. What made you pursue it in the first place?
Well, actually, I could give you a definitive answer to that. I would say that I started pursuing art the day I was kicked out of art class at the end of my junior year in high school. And that sounds ironic, but up until that point, I had taken art as a goof, just a filler class to just relax, whatever. And I had the same art teacher for 3 years. And he was a very mellow person, and I was the class clown. And eventually, even though he had a lot of patience, I brought him to the level of frustration where about a month and a half left of my junior year in high school, he kicked me out of his class. Now, I tried to get transferred into another class because I needed the credits to move on to my senior year in high school. But unfortunately, there was nowhere for me to go. So begrudgingly, I went back to his class, upset with him and him being upset with me. I decided just to shut my mouth and sit in the back and with a puss on and do my final project. And so I'm working on this piece for my final project, and I was looking at it. I was trying to get proud of it. So here I'm kind of taken seriously out of the situation, just because I was kind of being a jerk, to be honest with you. And I'm working on this piece, and when I was getting towards the end of it, a few days left in school, we had not said a word to each other. I hear him walk up behind me, and he says, "Michael." He just goes, "Hmm." And I looked up at him and I said, "That's pretty good, isn't it?" And then after that, he actually, I had him for 4 classes the next year, and he actually applied to school for me. He filled out my application and sent in my work and got me an interview at School of Visual Arts, in which I eventually went to college.
Wow,
in New York City.
That's an incredible and ironic story.
Yes.
So when you're making art, what do you prioritize first? Do you prioritize the concept or the aesthetic?
Well, aesthetic has its place because that's what brings viewers into the image itself. But I have this philosophy where the craft is basically the Trojan horse for the artistic concept. So keeping that in mind, I created something called conceptual glazing. So conceptual glazing is kind of like using the tenets of conceptual art, but using the skill or craft of the traditional painting of the old school masters like glazing. So it's basically taking those 2 schools of thought and marrying them together. And so I would say concept is much more important, but you need the aesthetic to kind of give it societal validity. So the better the craft, the more societal validity an image would get. And so people who may not be into the art world would at least look at something and say, wow, that's really well done. Why did they take the time to paint it to that level? Then maybe you would open them up to the concept.
So when you're creating these concepts, what is your method to work it out?
A lot of times I just take something like my stream of consciousness or something that's going on in current society, and like for instance during 9/11. Although what the 9/11 terrorists did is absolutely horrible. It was a terrible day. I had to think, like, how could people how could there be people out there sympathize to their cause? And I started thinking about what I would consider modern day Greek mythology, is kind of the Star Wars world. And if you look at Luke Skywalker, I had done a painting called The Hero of Relativity, which is basically a portrait of Luke Skywalker, and it says intergalactic terrorist. It's a hero of relativity. And if you think about it this way, Luke Skywalker was a disenfranchised farm boy who was took up spiritual guidance from a bearded, robed, cave-dwelling hermit, and he to take on the evil empire, say the power of the evil empire. And from that perspective, if you look at it that way, it's exactly what the 9/11 terrorists did. So it's the biased guise of the storyteller. So it's just to take stuff that's already thought in society one way and kind of turn it on its head. Take a cliche and make it fresh.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take on art and concept. So we've seen a little bit of your art, so let's talk about what you're working on now. We have a little bit of clips coming up, right?
Yeah, well, so going to the school that I went to, School of Visual Arts, which I mentioned earlier, is very competitive, and it kind of it made painting a chore in a sense, you know, taking so much time. And so before I learned how to paint, I used to do these little doodles, which is kind of what you're seeing now. Basically, it was just a one-line drawing. It would start at one point, and I would do a kind of a contour line and fill up the whole entire page. And I always enjoyed doing that. But then I learned how to technical paint, and it became like a chore, and you know, with craft and everything took over. And so I haven't enjoyed painting like I used to enjoy it. So during the quarantine, I decided to take my doodles as a kid and try to make them a cohesive image, try to create an actual, you know, image out of those instead of just being abstract. And so I was working on that, and now I'm developing a whole new style, which I would say is kind of like an homage to Keith Haring and H.R. Geiger, two of my favorite 80s painters or artists. And I'm trying to marry everything that I've done, from all my technical skill to my kind of enjoying it as an ignoramus, if you will, and try to marry them together in a cohesive style to get back to a place where I could actually enjoy painting again, and still try to keep the concept and the technical skill and the enjoyment of it all together in one place. So it's a new style that I'm working on, and I'm currently making progress, but there's still, when you're creating a new style for yourself, there's still, still a little ways to go.
Well, I think you're doing great. All your art's so beautiful, and each piece I could tell has an intricate message. So as an artist, what's your overall objective?
Well, I realize that as an artist, and you know, being a student of art history, not so much work, more the motivations of artists, I really try not to follow that. I realize that everything has been done. So for instance, like storytelling, right? There's only 8 stories that someone could tell: man versus nature, and so forth. There's only 12 notes that someone could play. So there's only so many, even though there's probably a wider variety of images that could be created overall, there's still a finite amount. So realizing that everything's pretty much been done, I try to build upon what's already been done as an homage, or to further the lineage of thought and to add to the overall stream of consciousness of mankind. So even if something anonymous, even if it's just one little image or one thing I say or something that's left behind where it builds on that stream of consciousness of the evolution, you know, of mankind, for instance, okay, the Happy Birthday song, right? Everybody knows the Happy Birthday song, but could you tell me who wrote that song?
No, I
exactly. So I would be pleased with that, or you know, leaving that little tidbit for the lineage of thought to be built upon, or an homage like Magritte did a painting called "This Is Not a Pipe," and it's just a painting of a pipe. But he was the first one to say, "People, you're looking at a painting. You're not looking at a pipe." But when people viewed it before that, they would say, "That's a pipe," and he said, "This is not a pipe." So I had done a painting that has to do with cloning. It's called A Reproduction. This is not a print. It's a painting of a reproduction. It's actually a painting of an artificial insemination. So it's a painting of a reproduction, not a reproduction of a painting. And that goes into the soul, and for instance, I did it on cement fiberboard, but it looks like wood, right? So it has a print of wood in it, but it's not. It's more durable than wood, but it'll never have the luminosity of wood. So basically it's saying, like, no matter how many times you clone my DNA, you'll never create the same person without experience. So without the experiences that person went through. So that's an homage on Magritte. So it's either going to be something, a cliche or a previous kind of thought, that mankind holds as a cliche, or building upon what has been done, overtly, unapologetically building upon what has been done, almost derivative of what's been done. Because I realize that I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I just have to kind of change people's minds a little bit.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Honestly, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your story. Thank you for tuning in to Garden State of the Arts, and tune in next week to see our next guest.